Islam in Focus is brought to you by Gala Travels. For all your travel needs, call Gala Travels at 416-491-5314 or visit galatravels.com. Islam in Focus is brought to you by PortServe International Limited, providing cargo handling services internationally. Please visit portserve.com. Islam in Focus is brought to you by Five Ways Financial, free consultation at no obligation. Visit fiveways.com. Islam in Focus is brought to you by Fortune Metals Inc., a top choice in scrap metal trading. Visit fortunemetals.com.
لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Focus. I'm Sajjad Saeed. I just wanted to remind everybody that we are on weekly on Rogers Channel 129, Bell Channel 217, and Express Food Channel 348. Today we are joined by Brother Hassanain Rajaali. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what organization you work with?
Well, I live in Dearborn, Michigan. We recently migrated there from New York.
Okay.
And I spent most of my life in the United States. And now Dearborn is our home. And we've chosen that community because we find it to be a very progressive community. And we have an institution called Tawheed Institute, which is a philanthropic organization, is a 501c3, and we actively work to promote institutions and structures that enhance the future of our communities.
Excellent.
And we also work towards improving the lifestyles of orphans around the world.
Excellent. Where can our viewers find out more information about your organization?
If they go to the website tawheed1.org, TAWHEED1.org, they will find some of that information there.
Excellent. I encourage everybody to take a look at that. Now, today's topic is a very important one. Since the beginning of time, we've always, as human beings, worshipped something. Right, whether it's God or we call, we worship money, we worship fire, we worship, human beings have always gravitated towards something. Now, what the question I have to start off our section or our show on the existence of God, who created God, right? If God created everything, then who created God? How would you respond to that?
That's a good question. First of all, with regards to worship, it's an innate character in the human being to want to worship that which is greater than them. So when we say people indulge in idol worship, for example, a superstar in sports or a Hollywood personality, it's because we feel that these people are special. They are above the normal human race, which is what leads us to always recognize superiority, hence the worship. People worship money, consider money to be a great instrument that empowers them. So they consider it to be a greater thing, therefore they worship it. So the fact that this is innate in us is evidential of the fact that there's something that we all have, and the question we should be asking is, why do we always want to worship something greater? Taking that into account, it's obvious, therefore, that the vast majority of the human race has always believed in a deity of some sort. How they've described this deity has varied. Some have considered it to be a dual kind of a deity, of a good and a bad God, or a God who shows in various forms and shapes, or an absolute God who cannot be described. The latter one is what Islam prescribes and proscribes. So, the question, who created God? The answer to that is no one, because God has always been present, therefore there was no need to create him. Now you might ask, well, what's the evidence for that? Well, the simplest evidence we have from a rational argument is that since we're all created And if the question is that who created God, and if we were to accept the reverse in stating that therefore God had a creator, then I would ask you the next question, who created that God? You will say, well, another God. Well, who created that God? You'll say another God. Well, then logically you would have to take it to infinity. And infinity at that level would imply that no one can exist, because there's an infinity of waiting for a preceding God to create the next
Gotcha.
God. But since we do exist, then rationally we can say that whoever created us must be the one who was not in need of a predecessor. Therefore, no one created God.
That's a really good point. I want to play from a different angle now. Would that be a little bit of the flaw in traditions such as Greek mythology, where they have several gods and they have an ultimate God, and it just gets so confusing for people? Do you think that's why ideologies like that do not last the test of time, and why so many people tend not to follow those type of schools of thought?
All religions that practice idolatry of some sort practice it because there is a physical reality that is a natural reality, and they do a disservice to God by applying their physical limitations to an absolute being.
Okay.
Because we humans are stuck in a frame of reference, meaning time, matter, and space is something that's innate in us. We can't escape that. Everything we talk about is within this frame of time, matter, space, and time-space continuum. Then it's natural sometimes for us to take an absolute God and bring him into our realm.
So just so we can see him and picture.
Correct. We try to give him a body, a shape. We give him a frame, and of course we give him the reference of time.
Right.
These are all false.
Right.
That is why idolatry is wrong.
Okay.
It's because our nature is to be so frame-oriented, we want to bring God into our frame. So even major religions like Christianity, that believes in the oneness of God, insists that God needed to bring himself through our frame so that we could physically touch him.
Right.
Which is absolutely wrong.
Right.
From an Islamic perspective, God is too great to
Right.
ever be considered to be a part of his creation.
Right. Well, I understand those points that you're making. Now, the other question that I have now kind of builds upon the last few points that we've been discussing. Every single organism requires sustenance in order to survive. Does this also apply to God?
No, absolutely not. Because if God is in need of substance, then it goes back to the initial question of who created him.
Right.
Because now he's in need.
Right.
Therefore, we understand rationally that God has to be totally needless for him to bring about our existence. For if he is in need, then there must be a predecessor supplying that.
Right.
Which takes us back to that initial
Gotcha.
question of infinity.
I guess because we're always looking at it from a certain perspective that relates to human beings.
Correct.
and you know, earthly beings, whether it's a cell or a microorganism. We're taught in science and physics and things like that everything, you know, everything needs sustenance, everything lives and dies and all those sorts of things. But a lot of those rules do not apply, obviously, or most of them, or all of them.
None of it can
Yeah.
apply, because the basic premise is that all living things had a start,
Yeah.
had an origin.
Yeah.
So therefore we can conclude that they were all nothing before.
Right.
Now how can something come into existence from nothing with nothing by nothing?
Right.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
Okay, but we are something.
Right.
Then whatever made me must be greater than the something.
Right.
And that thing must be a being
Right.
that is indescribable, that is so almighty, so omnipotent, that everything originates from that being. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. In fact, we understand, for example, that a relative entity cannot exist without sustenance from an absolute entity.
Right.
And the absolute is none other than God. What is absolute? Absolute entity is one that has no time, no matter, no space. You might say, but isn't that nothing? No, it's not nothing. It is so great that it has no time, no matter, no space. But it is the absolute. Now you might say, how do I know that? And why do I talk about that? Since I can't describe it within my frames. What's interesting is if you ever want to get a window into this discussion to really sort of reconcile this issue, in the world of science you will notice that we all agree empirical science is an excellent tool for us to understand our own reality. And nothing is really closer to us than empirical science, because that which can touch the five senses is what gives us the greatest strength to understand who we are. So taking that into perspective, we do understand that science is an excellent tool, a necessary tool, to understand our own existence.
Okay.
But what is science made up of? If you really go to the core of science, it's mathematics that really makes up science. It's mathematical motions and movements. At that stage, calculus, for example, is really natural mathematics. And under those conditions, you will see that the true extremes in this mathematics is 0 and infinity. Well, 0 is nothing. But what is infinity? Describe it.
I guess it's difficult to describe because we don't really know what it is.
No one can describe
Right.
it. It's impossible to
Right.
describe it.
Yeah.
So then I would ask, why is pure science including it?
Right. Right.
Notice, subhanAllah, when Allah says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Everything is from God and everything returns to God. You will notice all physical objects give off a quality of going towards infinity.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
We can't describe infinity,
Yeah.
but it's there. And how many infinities do we have? Actually, there is no infinity in the physical world. But there is an infinity that cannot be described. And all physical relative entities are approaching infinity.
Right.
But infinity cannot be described.
Right.
Then what is infinity,
Yeah.
if not God?
Yeah.
And you notice, it's absolute in its nature.
Yeah.
But it's, of course, infinity is a concept in mathematics.
Right.
It doesn't really give off any attributes or qualities. So we understand that it's not a complete description.
Right.
But if the world of science needs everything to be reasonably explained,
Yeah.
then it's only logical that infinity should never be
Right.
brought into science.
Excellent. That's nicely put. Now, my next question is that there are so many people in this earth, past and present, in the billions, right? If we count the amount of people who currently occupy the world and who have occupied the world in the past, they're in the billions. Now, every person has different thoughts about God. Now, how can a person know if their thoughts about God are truly correct?
Well, what's fascinating to me, that anybody who believes in a God, and even one who doesn't believe in a God, like an atheist, insists that a God must be absolute and perfect. Atheists are atheists because they're convinced that this imperfect world, the way they see it, denies the existence of God. And the argument is that for God to exist, He must give off everything with perfection. So once again, He's no different than a believer in God.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
If you really look at it, the entire human population unanimously agrees on
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So that sets the standard.
Yeah.
That for God to exist, He must be absolutely good, omnipotent, almighty, powerful. The atheist also insists that for God to exist, He must be that way. The difference, the atheist says God doesn't exist because I see flaws in the creation, therefore I reject Him.
Right.
But that flaw is a sense of perception which needs to be corrected.
Right.
But it still sets the standard. That
Right.
why do you even discuss the existence of God on this premise?
Right.
Which is our fitrah telling
Right.
us that even a disbeliever in God insists that if God were to exist, He must be absolute and perfect.
Right. So they
So we
just
unanimously all agree.
Gotcha. Now, my next point kind of builds upon what we just discussed. There are so many different religions in the world today. And even within religions, there's different schools of thought, ideologies, and things like that. Is there any one way of knowing that if you follow a religion, is it correct at all, or are they somewhat on the right path? Because a lot of people will discuss that term very, very loosely, like, "Oh, I'm on the right path, and if you don't follow my religion, you're going to hell."
Right.
Now, I'm not knowledgeable enough to really say who's right and who's wrong. Obviously, everybody has the proof, right? If you go talk to a person who follows his religion, he'll bring out his books and he'll show all his proofs and all that. So, is there any way that we can do a litmus test on the religion that we follow to understand if it has some basic truth in relation to God about it?
That's a good question. What's interesting is every person who's pursuing any religion, and wherever they've parked themselves in terms of their belief system at the moment, they insist that wherever they are, it is the best system. But they also insist that where they are tends to be the only system and everything else must be wrong,
Right.
unless one is a pluralist.
Right.
And even pluralists insist that as much as we may accept you, my religion is right, but my religion is allowing you to exist. At the end of the day, I'm still right.
Right.
I'm accepting
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
but
I'm still right, yeah.
Why is that? Because rationally in our minds we know that there is one fixed truth. In the world of science, it's the same thing. 10 scientists can do research on the same specimen, and each one will come up with a different conclusion. At the end of the day, we all know, though our conclusions may be different because of the frame of reference and perspectives, there is one immutable truth in the issue. And the theoretical system is now going to lead me closer to the truth while I supplant my preceding theories if they are proven wrong.
Right.
That's why science is always in a state of flux. It's always changing. It's evolving.
Right.
But the evolution of science, nonetheless, will have no credibility if there is no intrinsic acceptance, meaning a basic fundamental acceptance that the evolution is moving towards the truth, which is immutable. For if the truth was mutable and it was constantly changing, then all my research is useless because all my tabulations have no meaning. So there is this clear understanding that there's a fixed truth in everything. We all must aim towards it. Well, no different in religion either.
So what would that truth be from your perspective?
The truth, well, the fundamental truths are generally shared by all religions.
Okay.
The truth of honesty, integrity, truthfulness, kindness, generosity. All religions, pretty much, all major religions at least, will promote that. They have to. You can't be a total liar. By the way, there's no such thing as a total liar. Even a liar must have some truth in him. Otherwise, you can't call him a liar. So we must understand that the reason we have multiple religions is that there is the one truth of God. Then humans either misunderstand it or they actively change it to confuse mankind in order to take control.
And that could be for different reasons, political.
Correct. Or personal agendas. Which then leads to all these other religions that have all taken the initial structure that God has sent down. And then mankind adulterated. Because remember, in Islam, Adam alayhi salam, Adam, the first man on earth, is also the first prophet of God. So the religion of God started first. That means whatever has come as a result thereafter must have originated from that. Adam. And then people took it and they put a few changes to it and it became a different sect and a different religion. But there is always one true religion of God that has always existed and will continue to exist. Our objective is to find that one. How we apply universal principles. If a religion says to me that God has chosen me as a special person and you as a special person and the rest of the world is the scum of the earth, I can immediately tell you from the litmus test that this God is a false God. For an omnipotent God can never be selective at the such.
Which makes sense.
Okay, so you can pass that litmus test. If a religion tells me God came as a human being and he died, well, you're challenging the absolute question then. Well, under that condition, you know immediately something's wrong with this. It doesn't fit the mold of trueness. Unless, you know, and once you start making issues to try to validate that God loves us, he wanted to die, he killed himself, whatever, it just doesn't compute. So we know this is wrong. So the litmus test is fixed. We just have to apply it and you will see the purity of religions very quickly.
And I guess the one thing that I've learned from interacting with people of different faiths and things like that, the commonality that I see with people, quote unquote, who are religious, they have faith in what they're believing in. Now, I'm not saying whether that's right or whether that's wrong, but what I tend to see with people who have faith, they tend to be better people. What would you comment on that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. Faith, you know, faith is something that we all have. Even atheists, by the way, as much as they may reject the notion of faith, they have faith. You have to have faith in goodness. You have to promote goodness, right? Even an atheist will tell you, I promote goodness. Okay, well, that's having faith in something. Because now you're promoting something that's really not tangible. So people who have faith in other religions, in general, the human race is a good race. People of different religions, when they have faith, they're good people. So let's not denigrate that, of all religions. Where we need to be careful about is when faith is driven by wrong principles. Then it becomes destructive. So those who are zealots, and they really have faith in their religion, but they have misread their religion, or their religion really tries to promote harm, then that faith is a dangerous
Which I guess comes in the form of extremism in all religions.
Any form of extremism in any religion is categorically wrong because God has created a system of moderation. And God has shown us very clearly any form of extremism, even the term extreme, you will notice, as much as we love extreme sports, okay, and we try to push
it's dangerous.
Exactly. It's not something that's balance,
Yeah.
not something that has stasis.
Yeah.
Well, the natural phenomenon in life is moderation,
Right.
and that must be the religion of
Right.
God. So
Excellent.
any form of extremism is
Yeah.
definitely wrong.
And I guess the next question I kind of want to build upon that is, regardless of what our views are on God, whether we follow in a certain way or the next guy follows in a certain way, like you've been saying, there's an absolute truth.
Correct.
Right? So it is our duty to always strive towards that truth.
Exactly.
Right? Whether we read books on Christianity or Islam or Hinduism, inevitably, if there's one truth, we will always be led to that truth.
And that truth, by the way, is a collection of truths.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
all religions have some truth in them.
Yeah.
No religion can survive if they didn't have some truth in them.
Right.
The question is not that.
Yeah.
The question is which religion has all the truths,
Right.
or the most truth.
Right. Is it correct, from an Islamic perspective, that we believe in several prophets, not just one or two?
We believe in over 100,000 prophets, 124,000 prophets. The Quran states that every community has been given guidance.
Okay.
وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ هَادٍ. We have given every community guidance. And Allah says we never punish a community until we warn it first with prophets.
Is this view shared with any other religions, that there were other prophets that guided other people, or is that a concept that is unique within an Islamic
In
perspective?
the Abrahamic faith, it is pretty much accepted.
Okay.
Judeo-Christian Islamic, it's
Okay.
generally accepted. But Islam takes it further. The Judeo-Christian concept of Adam, for example, as being the first man on earth, they do not consider him to be a prophet of God. But Islam sees Adam as a prophet of God, meaning the first human being had to be a prophet. For every human being needs a guide. Thus,
Gotcha.
the first person had to be a prophet.
Okay. Now, in a nutshell, if you want to summarize for our viewers, I know we've talked a lot about different points, what would be the difference between Islam's view on God and other religions?
I think when it comes to the purity of monotheism and the description of the monotheistic God, I think no religion in the world has the complete picture as Islam does. Because the Quran, which is the final revelation to mankind, is very, very clear in establishing the perfection, the oneness, the absoluteness of God. It is so beautifully described. When Allah says, قُلْ هُوَ Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. What a magnificent set of verses.
What does it mean in English?
He says, in the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful, say, God is unique. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ. God is independent. He neither begets nor is he begotten, and there is no equal to him.
MashaAllah, that's
It's magnificent.
profound statement there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that a lot of people who get educated in the Western world, we learn about such theories as Darwin's theory of evolution. And if I'm not mistaken, it was his death or birth anniversary recently, so people were talking about him in the media, and also the Big Bang theory. Is there any truth to such theories, or are they just based solely on scientific research or hearsay, or what are your views on that?
Well, the evolution theory and the Big Bang theory all have credibility.
Okay.
I mean, let's not discount it.
Okay.
It's gone through rigorous scientific processes,
Right.
and you can't discount that.
Right.
It's not these theories that are a problem. It's the conclusion and the false conclusions that are being drawn by using these theories as a stepping stool to reach something that's outlandish.
Right.
Such as, well, the evolution theory proves the non-existence of God.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
It's nonsense.
Right.
Evolution is just a process within a grand scheme of things. So if we're just going to use a tool of evolution to prove the non-existence of God, then you've really barked up the wrong tree.
Right.
Okay.
So there
So
has
anybody who's trying to argue about evolution, creation, and so on,
Yeah.
it's foolish.
Someone had to still create this
It's
evolution.
still begging the question.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
We established that from
Yeah.
nothing comes nothing.
Yeah.
So there is a creator, and this universe is far too structured and far too complicated. Roger Penrose proves the probability of the universe coming to existence out of pure chance is zero.
Right.
Zero. So what are we talking about?
Right.
So it's not that. The Big Bang theory, in fact, from what we understand from Quran and from a logical explanation, Quran does not reject it. In Surah Anbiya, Allah discusses this expansion of the universe. You know, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Do the disbelievers not see that the earth and sky was once one and we opened it? فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا.
There was some kind of bang, I guess.
Well, not the bang. You see, actually, science has a misnomer.
Okay.
Because bang implies greater entropy. You know,
Right.
you're moving towards
Yeah.
greater disorder.
Yeah.
When in fact, the universe has never lost its orderliness
Right.
from the moment of the bang.
So it's just labeled.
So the Quran actually is correct, and not the theoretical science using Big Bang theory. The Big Bang was just actually a statement made by those who were against the theory. And they
Gotcha.
were poking fun at it.
Right.
They said, oh, sort of like a Big Bang, eh? Well, then it stuck with that name. But actually, Big Bang means moving from high order to high disorder.
Right.
When in fact, Quran says, فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا, meaning it never lost its order. And we made every living thing out of water. Do you still then not believe? This is modern discovery, that living things come from water. It's a modern discovery.
Excellent.
SubhanAllah, look. So the Quran doesn't reject these issues,
Right.
but it still begs the question, so what? In fact, the Big Bang itself proves the point that it had an origin. Well, even Stephen Hawking in his book states in A Brief History of Time that I cannot speak before Planck's moment, which is 1 times 10 to the minus 43 seconds, because all science degrades. So that whatever has made it is not within the scope of science.
Excellent.
And he says, then the philosopher must come in and fill in the gap.
Excellent.
Well, there you go. We're back to religion now.
Excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed sharing the time with you and learning more about your perspectives. I just want you to summarize your points in 30 seconds or less. If people want to learn more about God and His existence and things like that, where would you suggest they start and build from there?
Well, as the Prophet has said, "Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbahu." When you know yourself, you will know your Lord. I think we should focus on the spectacular nature of our own existence.
Excellent.
And I think if we understand it and ask the question, can this thing just happen by fluke?
Yeah.
You know, when God gives you a child and you're holding this baby and you still disbelieve in God, I think you should have yourself examined.
Okay.
Honestly.
Yeah, that makes
because it just defies common sense.
Yeah.
Now, the disbelieving government says, well, I don't follow common sense. I says, well, then you might as well relinquish your humanity.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it is that basic inner conscience telling you,
Yeah.
how can this baby, so beautiful, so
Yeah.
shaped, so formed, so driven,
Yeah.
all come out of a series of accidents, out of
Yeah.
some primordial soup that
There needs to be
originated from no reason.
Yeah.
And it's so powerfully reasoned here that
Yeah.
I'm holding this child, I have a bond, I have a love relationship, and I want to be with this child eternally.
Yeah.
Well, what has all of this brought into eternally?
Yeah.
Who decided eternity?
There's an architect
Oh my
behind that
God,
plan.
it's absurd.
Excellent.
I mean, I can just go on and on and on.
Excellent.
I don't need to speak more about
Excellent.
that after that.
I do appreciate your time. And once again, if you could remind the viewers where we could get more information about your organization. It was Tawheed.
Tawheed1.org, TAWHEED1.org.
Excellent. Brother Hassanain, you're welcome back here at the Jaffer Islamic Center anytime. And we will see you viewers back here on Islam in Focus next Saturday. Thank you and Assalamu alaikum.
Brother Hassanain, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our center at ISAJ Jamaat Toronto. It's been nice to having you, and our youth, our community benefited at large. In appreciation, we would like to give you these books. One of them is Dynamic of Salah, and the other one is Crossing the Bridge. This is written by our scholar from Tanzania, Ma'alim Muhammad Karmali. And the last one is Discover Islam, which has been written by our resident alim, Imam Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi. I hope this will give some insight of what we do in here as Tabligh, as outreach, and look forward to see you once again.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. May Allah bless you.
Islam in Focus is brought to you by Gala Travels. For all your travel needs, call Gala Travels at 416-491-5314 or visit galatravels.com. Islam in Focus is brought to you by PortServe International Limited, providing cargo handling services internationally. Please visit portserve.com. Islam in Focus is brought to you by 5ways Financial, free consultation at no obligation. Visit 5ways.com. Islam in Focus is brought to you by Fortune Metals Inc., a top choice in scrap metal trading. Visit fortunemetals.com.